From the Aishin Broadcast Studio, it's the BodyShop Business Podcast.
Hey there, it's Jason Stahl with another episode of BodyShop Business, the podcast. And today, my very special guest is Ian Musselman, who is a Senior Vice President of External Affairs for LKQ Corporation. Welcome, Ian.
Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing me to come on your podcast and excited about our conversation.
You're welcome. So we're going to talk about legislation today, and it may not be the most exciting topic for some collision repairers. You know, they tend to get very mired in the day-to-day, right? Repairing cars, delivering the perfect vehicle to their customers on Friday. They're very entrenched in that. And sometimes legislation, although it's important in our industry, and you're going to explain why later, it's kind of off their radar, or sometimes they feel if it involves insurance companies that, I just can't fight that battle. They've got too big a lobby in DC. So there's reasons that this industry doesn't pay attention to legislation, but we're going to talk about that today, and you are an expert in this field. So I guess I want to start with right to repair. And let me start by saying that for the most part, up till now, collision repairers have sort of ignored this or not understood it because in their mind, they have all the access they need to do the repairs that they're doing. Although recently, I think that collision repairs are starting to pay attention to right to repair for various reasons. But for the most part so far, doesn't concern me, doesn't affect our industry. I want you to explain what right to repair is and why collision repairers should pay attention to it.
Jason, you in your opening remarks hit on a couple of terrific points. One, yes, LKQ is involved in the discussions around right to repair because we serve the majority of the 260,000 mechanical and collision repair shops around the country. For us, these are our customers. These are the folks that rely upon us to deliver on time, deliver with quality parts that allow them to then serve their customers, the car owners, get their vehicles repaired in an efficient and safe manner and be put back on the road so that they can get their families around day to day. And all of these 260,000, we look at them as almost small businesses, right? A lot of them are, they don't have the sophistication to be monitoring legislation, following Congress. Right now, if you read the newspaper, you're not hearing things necessarily about right to repair. It's more focused on markets and areas that may not affect necessarily that business, day to day. So this doesn't pop up on their radar, and certainly car owners, this is way too in the weeds for them to raise with their body shops. But I think as you touched on, the way in which repair shops are servicing their customers is changing. The way that they are accessing information on their vehicles is changing. The way that they have access to parts and the choices that they have to offer their customers, that's changing. And in some cases, they may not understand why, but they understand that, well, instead of having 3 to 4 fenders to choose from, they may only have 1 or 2. And so, they are looking at this as how can they service their customers? And if they can't service their customers as efficiently as they used to, they're starting to perk up and wonder why. So to get to your second part is what is right to repair? We look at it as right to repair is a large umbrella and kind of explaining exactly where I just touched upon is service centers and collision centers, their ability to access data, we look at as one bucket. Because when they receive a vehicle, they've got to diagnose what's wrong with that vehicle. Obviously, from the exterior point of view, there might be a body panel that's got to be replaced, but underneath that, what is more of the internal damage, and they've got to assess that damage. And as we all know, the very first thing when a vehicle rolls into a shop, whether it's a service center or a collision center, it gets plugged, a scan tool is plugged into the OBD port. And that from that feedback is where they begin the process. So getting that data is really important. And we look at that as one bucket. And then number two, I touched on is being able to offer your customers choice in a competitive marketplace. That's incredibly important. You know, do you want to offer your customer the OEM uh, bumper cover? There might be an alternative brand bumper cover that's of equal quality, has been CAPA certified, and there are also multiple brands that they may offer that you're working with your insurance companies, you're working with your customer in the door, and we look at that as another bucket. As access to parts is equally as important to access to data, because when that car comes into the collision shop, if that shop cannot offer the full realm of capabilities to repair that vehicle, and they've got to maybe offload some of the work, they're not going to take that job. They want to be able to take the job from beginning to end and give the customer a car back that they have faith has been repaired properly with quality parts and effectively so they can get their family around.
Thanks, Ian. That's a great explanation. And so the other thing we want to talk about is the Repair Act. And that's, I think, one of the confusing things we got, right? To repair, we got the Repair Act, we got the Smart Act. Tell me, and you mentioned the choice of parts, and that kind of plays into this. Describe to me what the Repair Act is and where that stands right now.
Yeah, so the Repair Act we look at as falling into the data bucket. That deals with, as I mentioned, the first order of business when a vehicle comes into a shop is a scan tool gets plugged into the OBD port. That's the way that service centers and collision centers have kind of diagnosed what's going on with a vehicle for decades, and that's become the typical way of understanding what's going on with a car. Now, some of that information it isn't necessarily bypassing, in some cases, the OBD port, though it could, and is being sent from the vehicle directly to a cloud. And that information is able to be accessed by certain shops, but not by all shops. And so, what the Repair Act does is ensure that that service center, collision center, can receive the information if it's being sent to a cloud. They have the capability to pull that out of the cloud, no matter what shop it is, whether it is an OEM dealer service center, whether it's a an OEM approved service center, or an independent service center. We want all those 260 shops, give them the ability with quality trained professionals to access that information. So it's no different than plugging in your scan tool into the OBD port. We just want that same information to be delivered in a readable and standardized message to whatever shop the customer chooses to take their vehicle to. An example that where this could be effective legislation is in replacement of a side view mirror, right? Not really an overly complex repair. Something that you can use a salvage reconditioned mirror. You could use a new OEM mirror. In some cases, the internals of the damaged mirror still work, but you might need a new mirror casing that's provided by an alternative brand supplier. Well, when you reinstall that side view mirror, the software has to be updated with the onboard ECU to ensure that it's working properly. The Repair Act would allow for that collision center to have access to the software codes that allow that new mirror to be scanned properly and the software be updated so that the owner can fully operate that mirror moving forward and delivered back to the customer.
Great. And I think it's interesting, Ian. You're simplifying it for me too, because I get confused on this stuff too. So you said the Repair Act kind of falls in the data bucket. And I assume
Yes.
that the right to repair falls in the data bucket, correct?
I Right to repair sits over top of the data bucket, and then additionally parts. You mentioned the Smart Act. And accessibility to different parts is equally as important, as particularly in the collision uh, space. So having the ability to access a hood, if you're looking at a certain, Chevy 2500 HD hood might have a might have an air intake in the center of the hood. Well, are there does the collision center have the opportunity to procure that Chevy hood? Maybe there could be a, supply shortage, and there's an alternative brand hood that could be used in that place. And so, what the Smart Act would do is allow GM to recoup the cost of innovation and design of that hood at point of sale, which they do, but then it would also allow for alternative brands to compete in the replacement hood market. So in the collision center market, they could offer alternative hoods for that vehicle so that the collision center has options to give to the consumer. So we also look at the Smart Act in the right to repair bucket. So those would be the two pieces. And if you're truly a collision center, as mentioned, you need both to effectively serve your consumers. LKQ is for free and open markets, and let the competition kind of rule the day. And we wouldn't be involved if we weren't hearing from our customers, those collision centers and service centers, that they're facing these challenges. And as we mentioned, how do they pick up and understand these? Well, they're seeing these challenges in their day-to-day business. So they've asked us, why has this changed? Why are we having more difficulty with multi-brand scan tools? How come we're having difficulty finding alternative brand hoods? Can you help us? And some of those barriers we see, and they've been identified by the Federal Trade Commission back in 2019 in their Nix to Fix the report, is that there are barriers when it comes to data. There are barriers when it comes to design patents and accessibility to parts. So LKQ has really, what we see is servicing our customers by getting involved in attacking some of this legislation.
Presented from the Ishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Interesting. And so, there's a segment of the collision industry that is anti-aftermarket and anti-salvage parts for a lot of reasons. One might be liability, another might be some shops feel that they are not making their customer whole by putting those parts on as opposed to the original part. But they don't understand also that by restricting consumer choice, restricting the parts availability out there, could lead to more total losses, which no one wins in that situation. Maybe the insurer wins. But so tell me the importance of consumer choice in this whole spectrum of legislation and accessibility to affordable parts.
Again, hit the nail on the head with it's about free and open markets. That's sort of where the competitiveness and why the United States is such a great country is we have choice, right? When you go to the grocery store, you don't have one brand of ice cream. Multiple brands. You've got to be able to have choice in repairing your vehicle. That's where the consumer, the vehicle owner, they've had the ability to choose for over 100 years, and how they maintain and repair that vehicle. We're just trying to maintain the status quo. And whether or not a shop wants to offer an alternative brand part is up to them. For us, we believe they're quality certified aftermarket parts. That's why LKQ indemnifies the shops that purchase parts from us. We believe in what we sell. We believe in how we service our customers and how those customers service their clients. And so, again, the driver in competitive cost and lower cost of repair is in choice. As soon as you limit choice, cost goes up. and it's the economic driver. So we want to be able to keep the cost down for the car owner and keep costs down for our customers. And their costs are kept down by having the ability to choose.
Right. And you mentioned earlier, Ian, all the customers LKQ serves. I mean, LKQ is a giant company, and you guys are serving customers in every sector of the automotive market. You've got salvage parts, you've got aftermarket parts, you've got calibration now, and just all kinds of things. So how are you, what kind of role, explain your role. I know you're located in DC in the hotbed of the legislation and lobbying and all that stuff. Tell me, looking at this giant corporation that you work for, how big of a responsibility, how big of a department, how big of an initiative you have in the company behind this legislation and your role in DC?
Jason, that's a great question, because LKQ has built the Office of External Affairs, which includes our government and regulatory affairs specialists, for a reason. As one of the largest businesses, not just in the automotive industry, but in the world, uh, there are a lot of headwinds and a lot of tailwinds in which we need to work with government. Whether it's how we do business operations, there's a lot of discussion nowadays up on Capitol Hill about uh, tax reform and changing tax code. Well, we need to monitor those sorts of changes within legislation to ensure that our business has the ability to continue operating in an efficient manner. But also, as one of the leaders of regulation around the automotive industry, and as the largest parts supplier, or at least distributor in the world, we need to watch and monitor how different parts are regulated, how legislation affects the ability for the automotive world to operate. We look closely at emission standards because that'll change the trend in what are consumers buying, what are they driving. So as soon as that vehicle leaves a dealer's lot, whether it's new or used, the LKQ plays a role in its life cycle, whether or not it's supplying maintenance parts, whether it's supplying collision parts, God forbid they're in a collision, or it's the end of life. And how is that vehicle safely disposed of? Its liquids, its metals. We want to ensure, LKQ is touching that vehicle all the way along through its life cycle, and we need to be able to adapt and change. And so that's why we've established this office here in Washington, D.C. And again, I'll go back to what collision centers and service centers are telling us are they've seen increased barriers around access to data and the availability of parts. And they said, this is important for us because we need to better serve that vehicle owner. Can you help us? And so we want to be able to help our customers. And that's what we feel we're doing by being involved in the right to repair initiatives.
I like what you said earlier, Ian, about access to the vehicle. You're right. We talk about it in the pages of Body Shop Business all the time. The crossover happening. It's no longer an automotive repair service shop that needs a scan tool. A body shop is now scanning vehicles. Transportation is crossing into glass. It's crossing into collision. It's crossing into auto repair. There's a lot of crossover right now. So collision repairers should be concerned with access to the vehicle. So how do collision repairers get involved? Are there petitions to sign? Can there be a state association is it worth their time to visit the Capitol and talk about this? How do we galvanize the industry and get them all together and be able to do something substantive to get behind this legislation?
Well, there are a lot of great, trade associations working on this. You've got MEMA and their AASA aftermarket sub association. You've got Auto Care, and you've got the Car Coalition, the Consumer Access to Repair Coalition, all made up, and ABPA. So some great trade associations, and if the collision center were to reach out to any one of them, they'd be happy to steer them in the direction, to get them involved, to supply them with information. I think an important tool that's needed in the effort are testimonials. If there's a collision shop that's seeing barriers, reach out to the car coalition and supply your information, and they'd be happy to give them the tools that they may need to write a letter to their member of Congress or send a video message, even better, explaining the challenges. Because more and more shops are reaching out and are being advocates for themselves, not only for the industry, but for themselves, because they need to do that if they want to stay relevant and stay in business.
I'm glad you brought up associations, Ian, because I wanted to talk about that too. It seems like there's an alphabet soup of associations involved in this. You know, you got ASA and you've got AASA and you've got CAR, the Consumer Access to Repair Coalition. You've got MEMA. Do you feel like all these associations are rowing in the same direction in the boat when it comes to this legislation? Because I feel like there's some perhaps associations out there that are outliers that maybe have a different agenda or a different look on this. But do you feel that the majority of the automotive associations out there are rowing in the same direction?
You know, what we've seen, particularly in federal testimony, is that all associations have stated that uh, that repair is an issue, that there needs to be a legislative solution. Now, not all associations agree on exactly how that legislation is written, but they all seem to be tiptoeing around the same discussion points. And that one, data needs to be accessed, that collision centers and service centers all need to have the same data. They all need to be able to service their customers. So the intention is there, and I think everybody we would be best served to come to an agreement on how that data is transferred, in a standardized platform or in a standardized manner, readable manner for everybody to be able to read and properly assess what is wrong with that vehicle, able to get access to the parts to fix that vehicle, and then be able to at the end do post-collision scans to ensure that your technology, particularly your safety technology, is operating the way that it's supposed to operate. And so that's why we feel, the Repair Act, Dr. Dunn in the House and Senator Hawley and Lujan in the Senate have both drafted comprehensive repair bills that give the service centers and collision centers the information that they need to properly service the car owner.
All right, great, Ian. This has been great information. I think you've straightened us out on right to repair, the Repair Act, and the SMART Act, and why this is relevant to collision repairs. Frankly, it sometimes confuses me. There's a lot of activity out there right now going on. And again, I think a lot of times collision repairs get stuck in the day-to-day. Obviously, they have cars to fix and get out the door. So thank you for setting us straight. Thank you for setting me straight. And I appreciate all your time today.
Jason, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. I would reiterate that again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at LKQ or check carrepairchoice.org and see how you can get involved in the latest legislative battles around right to repair. Thank you so much.
I'm Jason Stahl. Thanks for watching. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Body Shop Business, the podcast. Check out bodyshopbusiness.com for more podcasts.